أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربي أنتقنا بالهدى وألهمنا التقوى. I greet you with the Islamic greeting. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. It's my pleasure to stand in front of you today for being part of such a great cause and this great organization and to see so many people out here. You know what makes the tragedy of Karbala eternal is the fact that you don't have to be a Shia to fall in love with Imam Hussain. You don't have to be a Muslim to fall in love with Imam Hussain. You don't have to be a parent to fall in love with Imam. You don't need to have anything except a beating heart. And if you have a beating heart and you understand the ethos of what Aba Abdullah alayhi salam stood for, it's very difficult for a human being not to fall in love with what he stood for and what he set out to do. For me personally, and I think when we all reflect about the tragedy of Karbala, I genuinely feel that we all connect to the message of Karbala in different wavelengths. Depending on what our difficulties and tribulations are in our particular life in that particular moment, we are able to connect to him in different spheres. And so I, for example, may be going through trouble with someone who's bullying me, for example, right? And I see how people try to bully Imam Hussain, and so I connect to him from that particular channel. While someone else, for example, may have trouble with losing a child, and so they see how Imam Hussain and his family dealt with the loss of children and the loss of family members, and so they connect with them from a different way. And we can give example after example, but that's the beauty of Karbala. And that's why Karbala will always remain eternal, because we will always connect to it from different perspectives and different wavelengths, inshallah graduating to that ultimate understanding of what he stood for, and that is to unite, right? To show that oppression cannot be tolerated, that when we see wrong around us, there have to be a group of people who stand and who rise and who support those who are unjust. And so it's a wonderful topic that was selected today about families belonging together. And we see this happening throughout the world with the refugee crisis, and in particular here in America, what's happening. It's sometimes hard to imagine, right, that how can a group of people tolerate such behavior? Right? Like, how can you see a 2-year-old child being split apart from their parents and you can still go to sleep at night and be okay with it? But sadly, that's where we are in society now. Sadly, that's where we have gotten to, where vices and shortcomings and evil are tolerated for partisanship. Yeah? Because of my allegiances to certain people, I'm willing to overlook the mistakes that those people are doing, and this is unfortunate. But we have to learn from this tragedy to see how it didn't matter what your family allegiances are. It didn't matter what tribe you came from. But what mattered is what you stood for. Right? And this is what we're going to try and learn from today. In particular, I've been tasked with talking about Imam al-Sajjad, our fourth Imam, and how we can learn from him to continue with this thought about bringing families together. And in particular, I've looked at it from the lens of what can we do in this climate that we live in, where families are being split apart, people are being discriminated based on race and based on gender and based on nationality. What can we learn from Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam in particular? Imam al-Sajjad is the fourth Imam of the Shia Muslims, or of Islam. And Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And he was the son of the third Imam, Imam al-Hussain. And the reason that he did not sacrifice his life or give his life in Karbala was because by the desire of God, he fell ill and was not able to continue. However, when we look at it from the grand schemes, it was so that he would continue the legacy of imamat and leadership and vicegerency after Imam Hussain would become a martyr. He was 22 years old in Karbala. And if you look at what he experienced in his life prior to Karbala and even in Karbala, you find that he had witnessed a tremendous amount of hardships, a tremendous amount of brutality. He witnessed with his own eyes the execution of his father and his brothers and his uncles. He witnessed how the children and the ladies of the house were taken as prisoners and were marched through streets and paraded. He witnessed the torture himself by the Banu Umayyah, being whipped, being kept hungry, being kept thirsty, deprived of basic needs, basically. And he was the one who buried his 3-year-old sister on the plains of Damascus. You know, that's a lot for one person to have experienced. Right? That's a lot. And what makes it remarkable, especially from my perspective and how I understand or how I look at it, is that having been through so much, when we look at the second life or the second half of the life of Imam as-Sajjad, we never find any negative consequences from the negativity he saw and experienced before. Right? So it's not that he became angry when he dealt with people because people dealt with him angrily. It's not that he bullied other people because he was bullied. It's not that he oppressed other people the way because he was oppressed. And that's a very humanistic response. If you're going to take something away from me, my reaction is to take something away from you. Right? If you insult me, my reaction is to insult you. But yet, when you look at the life of Imam as-Sajjad, we find entirely an opposite plan, entirely an opposite etiquette that he presented. Right? We see open-handedness. We see open-handedness. We see generosity, we see kindness, we see compassion from the Imam alayhi salam. And no matter what he experienced in his life, and you know what I take from that, is a very important lesson, is that whatever my baggage and my experiences are of life, I have to learn to utilize those baggages or those experiences to not act the same way that I have been treated in my life. We come from different cultural backgrounds, Just because, as the Reverend had mentioned, she came from Jim Crow, she experienced what she went through, she doesn't have to treat people in that way. She has chosen to treat people with love and compassion because she has experienced oppression. Right? We have come from cultures and societies where we don't trust, for example, the government, we don't trust the police, we don't have a voice. We live in a society now where we have a voice. We can do something about it. We can go out on the streets and protest. We can boycott. We can do so many different things to bring about a change within our society. And that's a responsibility that we have, and that's the legacy of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam that we have to live by. I want to just give a few examples from his life, because it's one thing to say that he treated people with compassion, but it's another thing to hear about stories of that compassion. There are a couple of stories that I'd like to share, and then we'll just basically understand what our etiquette or our responsibilities are. After seeing his own family being tortured, after seeing his own families being persecuted, after seeing his own family taken as prisoners, after seeing his own families executed, we find that he did everything in his power to ensure that that didn't happen to someone else in the future. Now we have this very beautiful example, that after he came back to Medina, after they had been taken as prisoners and then they did the Arba'een of Aba Abdullah and they returned back to Medina, the people of Medina, upon finding out what Yazid had done, they revolted against the governor of Medina who was a puppet set by Yazid. And so when they revolted, they overthrew the governor of Medina, Marwan bin al-Hakam. Marwan had a key hand in the execution of Aba Abdullah, Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Yeah? He was the one who tried to force the hand of Imam Hussain to pay allegiance to Yazid. And so when Marwan was overthrown, Marwan feared for his life because he had nowhere to go. Medina and the people of Medina had revolted. So he went to Abdullah bin Umar to try to see if he would help. And Abdullah turned him away because he knew that his hand was dirty and his hand was tainted with the blood of Imam Hussain. And so he had nowhere to go but to the door of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Think about that. Think about the irony in that, right? That this man killed his father, yet today he has nowhere else to go but to the door of the son who he had killed. Yeah? And he came to the door of Imam Sajjad. And Imam Sajjad alayhi salam guaranteed the protection of 400 of the family members of Marwan bin al-Hakam. 400 people Imam took in because he knew, he had felt oppression. Yeah? He had experienced it and he knew that his family had nothing to do with it. And so he accepted them and looked after them until things calmed down. Historians say that some of the women and children who Imam Sajjad took in swear by Allah that they've never found such rest and comfort in their own father's house the way they did in the house of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. But this is an example, right? That, so what if they don't look like me? So what if they don't have the same color skin as I do? So what if they don't have the same nationality I do? When someone needs help, we are those who are responsible for assisting them. This is the legacy that we come from, right? This is the teachings that we imbue in our lives day to day, and this is how we need to live. We look at another example, and this is a very famous example that it is told by numerous narrators that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam every night would leave his house in the darkness of the night and would go door to door and give every family that is needy something that they required, whether it was money, whether it was food, but he made sure that as long as he was alive, and as long as he had a place to live, and as long as he had food to eat, then no one else in his city went hungry and without a home to live in. And the people never realized who was the one providing for them until he became a martyr. And the first night that his body left the house to go to the cemetery is that when you heard children crying that today we haven't received our food. And that's when they made the connection that this is Imam Sajjad. You know, one of the very famous works that we have of Imam Sajjad is the Treatise of Rights, the Risalatul Hukuk, in which he talks about the responsibilities we have with our hands and with the different gifts that God has given us. And part of that responsibility that he mentions is the responsibility of the neighbors. And I'd just like to read for you what he says about them. He says, as the right of your neighbor, and the right of your neighbor is that you should be a guardian for him when he is absent, and you should honor him when he is present, and you should assist and support him in both situations, and you should not forsake them during times of hardship. And do not stop to be their supporter, and answer those who scold them, and divulge for him the deception of those who counsel him, and associate with them in an honorable manner, and there is no power or strength except in God. You know, there are tons of other examples that we can give, and there are amazing speakers who are going to come after me to talk about this as well. But I think one of the things that we can take, or some of the things that we can take, especially in the climate that we live in today, is that Imam Sajjad teaches us the importance of standing up for injustice. That when we see oppression in the world that we live in, we have to rise and support, whether it's financially, whether it's with our voices, whether it's with our intellect, whatever it is. But we can't go to sleep at night knowing that there are children who are away from their families, that there are families who are being denied basic necessities and rights simply because they don't have the same skin color as someone else, that they don't have the same nationality as someone else. The legacy of Imam Sajjad does teach us that families do belong together, that oppressions cannot be allowed in the society that we live in, and that it is our responsibility to stand up for them. You know, I pray that Allah gives us the strength to be courageous in what we do, and to give us the ability to stand and support those who are in need. I thank you very much for giving me this platform, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your hard work. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.